All right, in this video we're going to take a look at some research by Robert Frank in his book, What Price the Moral High Ground? And the title of the lesson is called Construal and the Prisoner's Dilemma. He'll introduce us to this game here, and it's a metaphor for social reality. And then we're going to see what this word construal means. In psychology, what it means is how we understand a situation, or how do we interpret a certain situation. So while attribution theory was about how we explain the behavior of ourselves and others, right? So we want to give a causal attribution of our own behavior or somebody else's. Construal is where we're taking a look at the entire situation and we're trying to interpret the situation. What's the nature of the situation that we might find ourselves in, or that somebody else finds herself in? All right, some background on the game. The Prisoner's Dilemma game. Well, it's a metaphor for the difficulty of achieving cooperation among rational, self-interested individuals. Frank likes to call it a commitment problem. The situation: both players get higher payoffs when they cooperate compared to both defecting. But, and this is a big but, no matter what the other does, cooperate or defect, players get higher payoffs by defecting. So it's easiest to see how the game works by looking at the payoff matrix. So here's the matrix. Here's what you're going to do over here. You're going to decide either to cooperate or defect. Your partner will make the same type of decision, but in the initial game that we're going to play, you do not get to communicate at all with your partner. You both simply have to decide, are you going to cooperate or defect, right? Now, you might say cooperate or defect about what? Well, about what is the points. This is the point payoff system right here. Let's take a look. If you both cooperate, then each of you will earn 2 points. You get 2, your partner gets 2 points. Suppose you both were decided to defect, then each of you would get 1 point. So it is mutually beneficial to both cooperate compared to mutual defection here. All right? So there's a collectively optimal strategy here to cooperate versus mutual defection. But let's take a look at what happens when you decide one thing and your partner decides another. In fact, what we're going to find is there's an individually optimal strategy to defect. And we can see this if we compare what happens when you defect, for example, and your partner cooperates. Well, if your partner cooperates and you defect, you get 3 points. Now compare that to the case if you were both cooperating. You see, so if your partner is cooperating, it's better for you to defect. You'll get 3 points versus the 2 points. And what about if your partner defects? It's again better for you to defect than to cooperate. If your partner defects and you cooperate, you'll get 0. But if you defect, you'll at least get 1 point. So no matter what your partner does, the individually optimal strategy is to defect. But the collectively optimal strategy is to cooperate. Mutual cooperation pays off more than mutual defection. So you see, it sets up a tension then between the collectively optimal strategy and the individually optimal strategy. Now the idea here is that this is analogous to many moral situations, which involve subordinating one's own interest to the interest of the group. And we'll see later that there is much debate about under what circumstances it is moral to subordinate your own interests to the interest of the group. Many say that there are plenty of examples where it is moral to do that. Others will argue not necessarily, that there may be many examples, perhaps most, maybe even all, that where the self-interested behavior is the moral thing to do, that subordinating your interest to the group is immoral, right? And somebody who might take that position is somebody like Ayn Rand, and we'll take a look at that a little later. Okay, so here's the problem. When a commitment cannot be made, as in the game I was just describing where you cannot communicate with your partner, the dominant strategy is to defect, right? Now in society, we can think of sort of many examples where there's a kind of one-shot prisoner's dilemma going on. Say you're out at a restaurant and you're deciding whether to tip or not, right? Maybe you're on a road trip. You'll never, ever go to that restaurant again. You'll never see the server again. Well, it is financially in your interest to just, pay your bill and leave 0 tip, right? So that would be like a defection. But the idea is that generally speaking, the collectively optimal strategy is for all of us when we go eat out at restaurants is to tip. It's better for everybody involved. When we tip, the servers are compensated for their work, and they're going to be nicer to us next time in their service and so on. So we all kind of benefit from this interaction. But at any one particular encounter with a server that we'll never see again, it might benefit us financially, of course, to leave zero tip. What about returning a lost wallet? Again, it might be in our interest to keep the money in the wallet. But as a general principle, the collectively optimal thing to do is to return the wallet. Our wallet might be the one lost at some later time. Voting, right? So it might be a hassle, or you don't have the energy or the time, or maybe you didn't take the time to figure out who to vote for or whatever. And so you might be thinking, well, what's my little vote going to do, you know, and out of 300 and something million votes or whatever it is. So you might say, well, it's in my interest to just not vote, let other people vote, right? But the collectively optimal strategy, of course, especially in a democracy, is clearly to vote, right? So cooperation is good for the collective, and defection, though, is good for the individual. That's the tension that we see in some of these life examples and is modeled in the game. Now, with repeated play, cooperation can be beneficial. But this requires certain cognitive and emotional abilities. So remember, the way we were playing this is a one-shot deal, but you can always just play the game with multiple repeating rounds of play. And there, of course, as you might say, you're going to want to pay attention to what your opponent is doing, right? So you have to be able to know your opponent and remember what they have been doing. And we can think of some system requirements for cooperation, you know, some cognitive necessities. Well, in order to do this cooperation on a repeated basis, you're going to have to be able to recognize the individuals that you interact with. So if you've got a social circle, right, maybe it's got 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, whatever, you're going to have to remember these individuals, what they look like, and of course remember their previous behavior. Right? Who was nice to you? Who stabbed you in the back? Who was helpful to your friend? Who was not helpful to a friend, etc. And from a theoretical point of view, some of the neuroscientists and some of these evolutionary biologists and modelers, they use computer models to simulate evolutionary processes. They argue that for a moral emotion to evolve, that is an emotion that tempts us, that sort of guides us to do a moral thing, two requirements at least are necessary. First of all, the emotion has to be motivational, right? It has to motivate cooperation, even in the face of defecting, when defecting would be in one's self-interest in the immediate moment. And two, there has to be a reliable way of identifying trustworthy partners, right? So moral emotions can evolve, but they first have to be powerful enough to motivate cooperation in the situations where, you know, your self-interest is tempting you, and secondly, you have to be able to somehow assess the reliability of those possible trustworthy partners out there. And how do we do that? Well, we're gonna use facial expressions, reputation. These are some things that we're going to use to figure out who's trustworthy and who's not, who's a reliable cooperating partner, who's not. In general, then, we can think of emotions as being adaptations, right? They have evolved to serve a function, to help us navigate, negotiate our social settings. Think about gratitude, right? It signals that a debt is owed. So when somebody does something nice to you, you feel gratitude. You feel like, yes, thank you. Right, and that expression of thanks, right, is a signal to whoever helped you out that you're likely to return the favor in the future. Anger signals something different, right? A violation of expected norms, right? You have been violated, right? So anger is signaling to the person that violated you that you recognize that they have violated you. It also does something else, right? So when you express anger at defection, or somebody violates some norm against you or something, it establishes your reputation for future encounters, right? So it is also in your interest to express the anger, not only to change the other person's behavior in the future, but to signal everybody else that you are the type to get angry. And so people won't be tempted to take advantage of you in the future. Sympathy, right, makes a person less likely to be tempted by short-term self-interest. So when we feel sympathetic to others, if we are in a situation where I can maybe defect and take advantage of them, well, I'm not going to, because I feel I have this kind of sympathetic bond with them. Kind of like a friendly feeling, or a feeling of trustworthiness is what we mean here by sympathy. Now, the social situation can be complicated because populations are likely to have a mix of cooperators and defectors, right? And so it becomes a challenge then for the cooperators to find each other. If cooperation has these benefits, right, then it's important to only interact with cooperators, right? Because every time somebody who's tempted to cooperate interacts with a defector, you're going to get taken advantage of. So what's critical here is for cooperators to be able to find each other. Now consider this fact here, that people trust kin more than strangers. And if you think about that, evolutionary psychologists would argue that what that kind of says is that we can think of family. The family is a sort of a small cooperating unit, right? And so we do tend to trust our family members more than total strangers. And because of that, then, we can benefit from cooperative interactions more with our family than strangers. We trust them more, and the trust allows us to benefit from cooperative interactions. Now, a lot of evolutionary biologists would argue that cooperation originally evolved as kin-directed behavior. And then later, cognitive skills like vigilance, paying attention to who's doing what and remembering who did what to whom, that allowed cooperation to extend to non-kin. Right? So imagine as the social situations were becoming more and more complex, the human brain was evolving systems to help navigate those complexities. And one of them then would be systems to increase our memory capacities, our vigilance, so that we could benefit from cooperation with non-kin people. We could expand our circle of cooperation from just kin to everybody else, right? That's powerful. See, because previously, if I was only cooperating with my kin, well, then I was losing out on possible cooperative benefits with everybody else in the society. So the idea is evolutionary processes favored brain evolution that allowed us to monitor these social interactions over time. And so, non-family cooperation. Well, if the cooperators can signal their intentions without being duped by defectors, right, copying those signals, then cooperators can thrive in a mixed population. So that's the key. So if we're going to expand out our cooperation beyond our family, then theoretically, what you would expect is that cooperators have to be able to signal each other. Now, some social psychologists argue that religion serves this function. It serves the function of signaling other cooperators in society. So if you're of one particular religion, then somebody else in that same religion, right, that's sort of like a signal, a trust signal, that this person can be trusted and you can cooperate with them. We'll come back to some of the social functions of religion a little later. But the general feeling of sympathy is a signal, and that can happen between total strangers. The phenomenon where you just meet somebody and you just kind of have that friendly feeling, or you feel like you're kind of bonded. You met them for the first time, or maybe you just got to know them and you felt like a little connection. That's the kind of thing we mean by sympathy. And what that does is it's sort of making it more likely that future cooperation will happen.